Hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining this Scrollpoints masterclass today. I think we'll get started now. So my name is Morgan. I'm an editorial success manager here at Shorthand. My colleague Paul is also here with me today, also an editorial success manager. And he's going to be sharing some helpful links in chat as we go through this session, and also helping to answer any questions that come through. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A box. As I mentioned, Paul will help to answer some of those questions. I'll also leave a little bit of time at the end of the session to address a couple of questions as well. So the Scrollpoints masterclass is going to last around 45 minutes or so. Hey, so let's take a look at what we're going to cover in the Scrollpoints masterclass. So first of all, an introduction to Scrollpoints. Then we're going to build some really wonderful Scrollpoints features in the Shorthand editor. So I'll be showcasing how you can use Scrollpoints to showcase photographs, maps, infographics, and lists. There's so many more use cases you can use for Scrollpoints, but this is what we'll take a look at today. By the end of this session, you will know all about Scrollpoints. And you'll also know how you can use it and what it's used for. So I just want to say here as well, I'm really excited to showcase how you can truly unleash the potential of Scrollpoints and take your reader on an animated journey and really elevate your shorthand stories. So since we're only going to be focusing on Scrollpoints today, we'll also just drop a link in the chat in case you want to learn more about shorthand and all the other section types and features and best practice tips. Then you can join one of our shorthand full training sessions. Great, okay, so let's get started. So this is the Scrollpoints default section. So this is what you'll see when you add a Scrollpoint section to your shorthand story in the editor. So you can see that there's a photo of a person sitting on a swing looking out over Paris. And so a Scrollpoint section, it contains a single image, and you can have many, many points of interest that the reader can explore. So let's start scrolling and take a look at some of the points of interest or scroll points in the default section. So first of all, we highlight part of this image, which is Paris. And then we explore a different part of the image so that the hot air balloons have a highlight box around them. And then we come to the fourth scroll point in this section. And so this particular scroll point has no defined highlight area. So it shows the entire uncropped image like we can see on screen. Okay, so let's jump on into the shorthand editor and take a closer look at scroll points. So this is my shorthand workspace. As you can see, I've got a bunch of stories on the go. Some are published, some are in draft form. So now I'm going to open up an existing shorthand story. It's actually the same shorthand story that I was just screen sharing a moment ago. Alrighty, so on the leftmost panel in the editor, we can see all the different thumbnails of the sections that make up the shorthand story. So we have our title section, we have our text section, and then we have the scroll point section that we were just looking at. So now I'm going to add a new section to the shorthand story. And I'm going to do that also on the leftmost panel where we can see the section thumbnails. So I'm just going to hover in between a couple of existing sections, and then the little add section button pops up. So I'm going to click on that, and then we can select the section that we're going to add to the shorthand story, which of course is the scroll points section. Okay, so first of all, I just want to mention that we can reposition the text box on the screen. And by doing so, it actually determines where the image sits on the screen. And behind the image, we can see a background effect. So this background effect is simply, well, if the image that we have in the scroll point section can't be displayed in a way that fills up the entire screen, like this example where it's a portrait image, then a background is generated from, it's like a blurred version of the main image overlaid with a semi-opaque color. So the background effect, this can be modified within the section options. So I'll just show you how to do that. So I'm going to click on the little cog icon, which is just on the far left side of the section. I'm going to open that up and scroll down to background options. Now, first of all, if I move the overlay opacity slider along, you'll see that the background overlay effect is getting darker until it reaches 100% and it's a solid color. So currently that color is black, but we can also change the color. So the colors here in my color palette, they're part of the branded theme that I'm using, which is one of the Shorthand basic themes. Of course, if you've got your own custom branded theme, then you'll have your brand colors here. We can also add any color that we want, the color picker, or dropping in the hex value as well. Okay, so next I'm going to change the default image. So to do that, I'm going to click on this green button where my mouse is hovering, which is Edit Background Media. Now I have an image sitting over here in my files, and I'm just simply going to drag and drop that in. Okay, so we have that there. Now I'm going to click Save Changes, and that'll close the media panel. So this is an image of Shanghai at nighttime. Now, first of all, I don't think this background, that pale blue background, to me, that doesn't work so well with this image. So I'm going to head back into the section options, and I'm just going to slide that background opacity slider right down, perhaps to 0. And that's giving me that blurred image effect in the background, which I think works really nicely with this particular image. Okay, so I just shut the section options panel, and now we can see the section thumbnails again. Right, so first thing I'm going to do is change the text in the text box. To do that, I'm simply going to highlight the text and change it. I can also change it to a header, and I can also change the position of the text as well. Now we can change the background color of the text box in Scrollpoints just by heading back to the section options by clicking on the cog icon. So then I can see some text block options. So we can have that set to light, dark, or we can choose another color. So I'm going to change the color. I think I'll leave the text dark as is. And I'm going to bump up the opacity a little bit on that text box, so it's at 90%. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I want to open up the Scrollpoints panel. Now you may remember that we've got 4 predefined Scrollpoints in here that were here from the default image. So to open up the Scrollpoints panel so we can start really digging in and starting to edit this section, I'm going to hover my cursor next to the section thumbnail. And alongside it, there's a couple of buttons. We can delete the section. We can copy the section. Those are options that you'll find next to all section types. But there's a special button that you'll only see with Scrollpoints. And it says Reorder Scrollpoints. So I'm going to click on this little button. And here we have the first scroll point. We have the second scroll point. Now that's existing, that's still there from when we were zoomed in on the Eiffel Tower, when we had that default image there. And the third one, when we zoomed across to the hot air balloons. So at this stage, I'm going to delete all of the scroll points apart from this first one, where you can see Shanghai. So to delete them, I'm just going to hover next to the scroll point thumbnails. And there's a little red trash icon, delete them all. Great. So now I've just got the one scroll point. Okay, so let's start creating some focal areas within this scroll point section. So first of all, I want to highlight the big building, or the very tall building on the left, which is the Oriental Pearl Tower. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click duplicate scroll point. Now I have two scroll points that are the same. I'm now just going to add some text to my text box, just some placeholder text. Now I want to edit this highlight. I want to edit the scroll point. So to edit the scroll point, hover my cursor over the scroll point thumbnail and click Edit Highlight. Now I'm going to draw a box, a rectangular box, over the part of the image that I want to highlight, which is this Oriental Pearl Tower here. When I do this, I get a solid outline over the part of around the highlight area. I can turn that off. I can leave it as solid. And there's also a few other options here as well. So flashing, dash, draw. I'm going to select the draw option. So you'll see that effect in a moment when I take it out to preview. I'm also going to change the color. Now, a couple of other things that we can do. We can add a marker. So we can position that marker anywhere within the highlighted area. We can also give a label to the marker as well. However, I am going to turn the marker off and delete the label for now. And then finally, there's an option that says darken around. So if I toggle this on, you'll see that there's an overlay opacity over all parts of the image that are outside the highlight box. Finally, I'm going to click Done. So now we've zoomed in on the Oriental Pearl Tower. Okay, so again, I'm going to copy the scroll point because I now want to move the focal area to another point on this photo. So I'm going to click duplicate scroll point. I've changed the text as well. So it's the Shanghai Tower we're now going to take a look at. And now I want to edit the highlight area. So I'm going to click and hover my mouse over the little edit highlight button next to the scroll point thumbnail. And what I'm going to do, rather than deleting the existing highlight rectangular box and creating a new one, I'm simply going to pop my cursor in the middle and drag it somewhere else in the image. So the first thing you'll see as I've popped my cursor in and clicked, there's a couple of red lines on the image. So they're the horizontal and vertical guidelines. So they're super useful for creating a scroll point section that moves perfectly horizontally or vertically. So this is beneficial for any image, such as like a grid or image that has strong horizontal or vertical cues, like maybe a graph or an infographic or a timeline. Right, so that's now highlighted over the Shanghai Tower. This time I'm going to change the outline to, let's go with flashing. I'll keep darken around on, and now I'll click Done. So now that the highlight, we can see the Oriental Pearl Tower the Shanghai Tower. So finally, before I take this out to preview and show you how it's really going to look once the story is published, I want to create one more scroll point. And so I'd like the reader to end on the full screen image of Shanghai. So I'm going to copy the first scroll point. And now I'm going to drag it by clicking on the little arrows to the left of the thumbnail to the end of my section. I'm just going to delete the text there. Alrighty then, so let's take this out to preview and see how it's looking. So to preview our story, we can click on this green preview button, or we can click on the little arrow just to the right of the preview button. I think this is a better way to do it because it then opens up the device simulator so we can see how our story is looking on multiple devices. Okay, so now we're essentially looking at how the shorthand story is going to look once it's published. So I've got some navigation in my story so that we can just pop straight down to that example I just created in the editor. Okay, so here we have our first scroll point with no defined highlight area. So we see the full image on screen. Now we see Oriental Pearl Tower, Shanghai Tower, and then we finish on the fourth scroll point, which is back to the full screen image. I'd just like to show you how this looks on mobile device as well. Hey, so we have our same image. It's set to landscape orientation. So on a tool device, we see more of that blurred background image. If we rotated our mobile device around, then it would show similar to how we were just looking at it on the desktop view. So we see Shanghai. We zoom in again on those highlighted points of interest on the image. Great. Okay, so I thought whilst I've still got in preview mode, that we'll just take a look at some other examples where I've used scroll points. Okay, so first of all, so here's an example of a photo that's been used and added to scroll points. So in this particular scroll point section, we've got the image position to the right and the text position to the left. I've also set the focus area, so we're zoomed in on the image. I'm actually going to jump back into the editor in a moment and show you exactly how to do this. So as I scroll, we come to our first highlighted point. So this time we don't have an outline on the focus area, but we do have a marker. And this is sitting over this fellow here, showing us who Knuckles is. As I continue to scroll, the marker moves to Buster, mac and cheese. Now there's actually two markers here, so we can have multiple highlight areas and multiple points of interest marked in a single scroll point. Right, so the next example I want to show you is a map. So this is a map of Porto. So again, this is showing a marker. So we've got a marker positioned on the map, which shows the Porto Cathedral. You'll notice with this text box that as well as having text, we have an image in it. So you can upload different types of media within a scroll points text box. So, like images and video and rich embeds and buttons and stuff like that. Then our little dot moves to where the Casa de Musica is positioned in Porto. So we could add many more scroll points showing different points of interest on the Porto map, but I've just got 2 here for now. Our next example, this is a good one. Okay, so data visualizations are so frequently brought to life in shorthand. And this can be done in multiple different section types, like the reveal section, the background scrollmation section, and so on. But also scroll points can be used to create beautiful, engaging data visualizations, such as the case here with this graph. So as I scroll, we highlight over January, and we have some accompanying text, a little icon in the text box. Then we move to a different part of the graph. And we continue on. Now, as you can see, as I'm scrolling, we're moving perfectly across the horizontal axis. So this infographic has been set up in the same way that I showed you in the Shanghai skyline example. So we kept the horizontal axis perfect. So it's like a horizontal scroll in shorthand. I'm sure many of you know that shorthand is renowned for its vertical scrolly telling, but this is a way that you can actually create horizontal scrolling within shorthand as well. Okay, I've got one more example to show you before we jump back into the editor. So let's go camping. You'll need some gear. Here's what we recommend. Bring a tent and some good walking shoes. A hat is also important. Here we have the moving, flashing dashes around the hat, so different from the previous 2 examples. Now, first aid kit is really important. So in this case, we've zoomed in on the first aid kit, and we've also got 2 highlight boxes around the first aid kit. One is the dashed line, the other is the flashing, to emphasize how important it is to bring a first aid kit. Also, don't forget a backpack. And then there's some other things you might want to consider. So here we've popped the little markers with labels on particular items, like the guitar or the compass. And then again, we've got multiple highlight areas on this one scroll point. It's just kind of reminding everyone of the most important things to take. So as you can see, you can even create really cool animated lists in the scroll point section. Okay, cool. So let's pop back into the editor. So as I mentioned a moment ago, I'm going to show you this particular example here. So the gang, I'll just scroll back to the beginning of the section. So let's see how we can build this in shorthand. So back to the editor. Right, I'm going to add a section just underneath the existing scroll point section where we have the gang, which I just showed you. I'm going to click Add Section, Scroll Points, of course. And then I'm going to click the green button, Edit Background Media. And I've got another image over here in my files, which I'm going to drag and drop into the media panel and click Save Changes. Okay, so this is displaying in a very similar way to how that default image was showing of the woman sitting on the swing. So you might wonder how we get from this to this. So first of all, I'm going to open up the section options by clicking on the cog icon. And I am going to change the background opacity to white. I'm also going to increase the background opacity because the default is 10%. Move that slider right up to 100%. So it's starting to look more like this section now. Okay, let's just quickly change the text here. Okay, so if we reposition the text, then it affects where the image sits. But if I've got my text box to my left and my image to the right, it's still not looking quite like this. So let's open up the scroll point section panel. So I'm just going to click on that button again, reorder scroll points. And that opens up my first scroll point, and then those 3 default scroll points that are in there as well. So let's just delete the default scroll points. And then I want to edit the highlight area of the first scroll point. So now I'm going to drag a box, a tighter box over the people in this image. So there's a little bit of guesswork here, a little bit of just playing around and seeing where you land. So first of all, I want to remove the solid line, set that to none. I'm going to click done and see if I've kind of got it in the right position. So now this is beginning to look a lot more like the example that we were looking at before. So I know with the example, there's also a couple of decorative elements in the text box. So let's add these to this text box as well. Now I'm going to duplicate the scroll point. So hover over the scroll point thumbnail and click duplicate scroll point. Now I'm going to introduce Knuckles. That's this guy over on the left of the picture. I'm also just going to add a little bit of placeholder text here. And I'm going to change the color of Knuckles, the text. Now I'm going to edit the highlight area. And now I'm going to create another box and position it over the top of Knuckles. With this box, again, I want to remove the outline. And I want to add a marker. I'm going to change the marker color so it's the same color as the text, his name in the text. I'm going to reposition that marker just underneath Knuckles. So now we have Knuckles. Let's also highlight mac and cheese. So I'm going to duplicate this scroll point. First, I'm going to change the text. I'm going to put a pale orange marker beside Mac. And cheese can have a blue marker. Okay, so let's edit the highlight area. Hovering over the thumbnail, edit highlight area. I'm going to reposition the marker over Mac. Change the color to correspond with his name in the text. And then I'm going to create another highlight area and pop that over cheese, removing the outline, adding a marker, and changing the color of the marker as well. Okay, so now we have the 2 dots over mac and cheese. Okay, so let's take this out to preview again and see if I've been able to recreate that same section type that we were looking at. So I'm going to close the scroll points panel just by clicking on the little cross icon. So I've gone back to the section thumbnails. I'm just going to add the section that I just created to the navigation. So I'm going to click Add to Navigation. So now we'll have two versions of that section, but it'll help us orientate when we take it out to preview. Okay, so it's looking pretty similar to the example we just looked at. So you can see that by adding highlight areas, it really repositions the image in different places on screen. So there's a lot to explore in this section. There's lots of really cool effects. And a lot of it is just playing around and seeing what happens. So we can highlight Knuckles and mac and cheese. So I just put a couple of scroll points in that example. Okay, so let's head back to the editor. I think we have time just for one more quick example before we open it up for some questions. So the next example I want to just show you in the editor is the Let's Go Camping. Alrighty. So I'm just going to scroll down to the existing Let's Go Camping section. Then underneath it, I'm going to create Add Section. And we're going to add our scroll point section. So here we go again with that default image. The first thing we need to do is change the image. So Edit Background Media opens the media panel. I've got my icons over here, the image, and I'm going to click Save Changes. So currently it looks very small, but look what happens if I move the text box to the center. It changes it dramatically. So I'm actually going to delete the text. So we're not going to have a text box on the first frame here. Now I'd like to edit the highlight area because I want to zoom in on the icons, have a closer focal area over the icons there. So to do that, we're going to click Reorder Scroll Points, which opens up our Scroll Points panel. First, we're going to delete the default scroll points that are in the section. So we've just got the one. I'm going to edit highlight area. And I'm going to draw a box over this part of the image that I want to highlight. Now this is more to guide where the image sits on screen. So I don't want an outline. I'll set that to none. Okay, so now we're zoomed in and the icons are filling our screen a lot more. So next I'm going to duplicate the scroll point, edit the highlight area. I think that first icon was a tent. We were looking at the tent, bring a tent, I think it was. So I'm going to leave the existing highlight area that's already there. I'll just click off it for a moment. And then I'm going to draw a second highlight area over the tent. Oops. Maybe I'll bring that in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to change the outline color. Let's go with the dashed outline here. We'll toggle on darken around and click done. Okay, so let's just do a couple more of these scroll points. So I'm going to duplicate the scroll point, edit the scroll point, and I'm going to move the little small square that's situated around the tent over to the hiking boots. Let's change this outline to flashing and click done. We can change the text there as well. One more scroll point. And I'm just going to show you on this last scroll point, because so far, the way in which we've been different scroll points is on this far left panel here. However, there's other ways that we can actually edit the scroll points. So, for example, if I hover over where the text box is situated, there's a couple of icons here. So one of them is in a highlight area. So by clicking on it, it opens up that highlight editor. So there's a couple of different ways that you can work within scroll points. And once you start playing around in scroll points and perfecting your scroll point sections, then yeah, you'll learn what approach is best and quickest for you. Okay, so I think our next highlight area here, I'm going to click on the box around the hiking boots and move it over to the horizontal axis. I'm going to keep that positioned on that. You can see the horizontal guide has popped up. So add that there. Now I'm going to keep that as flashing, but now what I'm going to do, because remember how the first aid kit was really important, we had to remember to bring that. So I'm going to zoom in closer on the first aid kit by highlighting the outer highlight area and bringing that in much closer, so we'll zoom in on the first aid kit. Great, so I'm going to take this out to preview again. So we'll just run through the first section that was already in the shorthand story. Bring a tent with some good walking shoes, a hat, first aid kit, really important, backpack, other bits and pieces, and a recap. So now I'm going to look at the one that I just built. So of course we just put a couple of scroll points here. So the tent, bring a tent, first aid kit. Oops, what happened to my hiking boots? I mustn't have duplicated the section. I'm sorry about that. Oh, I didn't. So yeah, I just have the three scroll points in there. So the full image of the icons, then the tent, and then we went straight to the first aid kit. Alrighty. Okay, so we're very close to the end of the session. So I just want to mention that we're going to share this shorthand story with you, which I have been screen sharing today. And it's also got some really handy resources at the end of the shorthand story. So you can actually download the images that I've shared today. So like the Shanghai image, the photo of the gang, the camp icons. And then you can practice perfecting your scroll point skills and try to recreate the images and the features that we looked at today. Also got the Scrollpoints help doc, which we can also share in the chat box as well. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, and I think we've already shared this in the chat box, but you'll have this to hand in the shorthand story, a link to where you can sign up for the shorthand full training session, which is our most comprehensive training session that covers really absolutely everything. Okay, so if you have any questions that you haven't yet popped into the Q&A box, then now is a really great time to do that. And it looks like there's actually a couple of questions already in the Q&A box. So I'm going to take a look at what's here. Okay, so there's a question. Has this story used shorthands for the scrolling images? And so thank you so much for this question, Rachel. And I see you've also shared a link to a shorthand story. So let's open that up and take a look. Nice. I have not seen this story before. Yes, good spotting. This is absolutely a scroll point section. So we have the first scroll point here. They have a text box added. And then as I begin to scroll down, then we come to the second scroll point, more text. Oh, this is a wonderful example. So great. Yeah, maybe we can share this link in the chat box as well, Paul, so others can open it up and check it out. Okay, so thank you for that question. So there's another question here as well. So how do you do the double surround like on your original first aid kit, please? Do you create two separate boxes? Yes, exactly. You create two separate boxes. Okay, so I can quickly show you this. So I'm going to edit the highlight area. So currently we just have, well, we've got two highlight areas. So I'll click edit highlight. We've got the little one, which is flashing. And then we've got the bigger one, which is kind of controlling the zoom. And so I'm going to now create another slightly bigger one. Okay, so we'll pop that there. I might change the color to the same as the other one. And then let's put this on dashed. Great, so it's a little bit bigger than the example before, but then I would just go back in to edit the highlight area and sort of reposition the dashed box so it's sitting a little closer. But yeah, so that's how you do it. You have two separate boxes. How do you ensure that the image you use in a scroll point section doesn't get pixelated as you scroll in? Okay, that's a great question. So absolutely, it would be a great idea to have a look at the Scrollpoints help doc, because within that we give recommendations for the perfect image size. So the pixel size and making sure that it's no bigger than 5 megabytes. Now, this particular image that we're looking at right now with the first aid kit. So this is actually a PNG. So we nearly always recommend JPEGs. But when it comes to kind of like a vector-based image, it might be a little better to actually use a PNG. So yeah, you want quite a high quality image to add to Scrollpoints. So yeah, a high resolution JPEG or PNG, but you want to make sure it's less than 5 megs. So we've reached the end of this session today, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. We will send a follow-up email, and so you'll get the recording and also the shorthand story that I shared today as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and thanks again for joining me. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.